So in many respects, the picture for endangered alphabets and endangered languages is pretty grim. Since I began working on this project about 3 years ago, 4 or 5 of the scripts that I was fairly sure I would be able to find and carve, I've literally been unable to find anybody who can still read and write them. It's a combination of government policies, of single language policies, cultural erosion, the spread of the internet, the fact that Facebook, for example, supports certain scripts and not others. A combination of factors, but not a very pretty picture. And even though we're involved in some efforts to try and revive certain scripts, the big picture does not look that rosy. But I want to tell one last story, which just goes to show you can never be sure. And it has to do with this script here, which is called Glagolitic. So I'm indebted to this, in this respect, to Will Shortz, who is the puzzle editor of the New York Times, who had me come and talk to a group of his friends recently. And he mentioned, he had been in Eastern Europe and he had seen some strange alphabet carved in the walls of churches, and did I know what that was? And had I carved it? And I said, I'm really not an expert, but I think that might have been Glagolitic, and I haven't carved it because it's extinct. It's just not used anymore. And I thought, I say that, but wouldn't it be a good idea if I actually knew what I was talking about? So I did some research and I discovered the extraordinary story of what has happened to Glagolitic. When the Greek Christian missionaries began moving up through the Balkans in a journey that would take them north and east and ultimately into Russia, they were not impressed by the writing they came across. In fact, they wrote very scornfully that it was a pagan script. It was just lines and dots and things. And so they decided that they would create a script that could be used in their ministry that would really reflect the glory of God. And in fact, they created 2. One was named after Saint Cyril, and it was Cyrillic. And the other was named after one of the Balkan words for writing, glagolica, and it was called Glagolitic. And it's this one here. And as you can see, this is an extraordinarily ornate script. It's really hard to imagine anybody using this in everyday life at any speed. It's maybe fine for carving in the walls of churches, but that's about it. And so consequently, because this was very inflexible and cumbersome, and because Cyrillic was quite adaptable, over the centuries, Cyrillic became the script of choice in a number of countries that were being Christianized throughout this sort of northeasterly direction from Greece. And Glagolitic more and more began to die out. Except there's one island off the Dalmatian coast called Krk, K-R-K, where there was one monastery which was so conservative that they decided that the priests on it decided that they were going to carry on doing all of their liturgical writing in Glagolitic. And they weren't going to have any truck with this modern stuff at all. And that went on way to the end of the 20th century. And in fact, there's some evidence that because the Christian writings from this particular monastery were in Glagolitic, it was sort of the holy script. And so fishermen who had a new boat would paint the name of their boat on the side of the boat in the Glagolitic script. So there was this tiny little island where this was surviving. And the other thing, of course, was that under communism, whenever any of the commissars would visit, the school children would have to sort of trot out some kind of presentation to them. And so often what they would do is they would present them with, flowers and things written in Glagolitic. Nevertheless, these 2 priests finally died, and it looked as if Glagolitic was doomed. But then what happened was the Yugoslav Civil War. As the country breaks up with the fall of communism, you have Serbia fighting Croatia, and then the domino effect and all kinds of things taking place. So when the dust settles, you have a situation where you have a number of new nation states, new countries, that sort of have a branding problem, because you don't really want to identify yourself as, yes, I come from the country whose former military dictator is now on trial for war crimes at The Hague. You know, that's just not good publicity. And so what happened was that Croatia, looking around for interesting historical, cultural, identifying iconography, branding, if you like, hit upon glagolitic, even though, in fact, that's by no means the only country where glagolitic was used. And so now, when you go to Croatian tourism websites, you see little bits of glagolitic cropping up here and there. And of course, most people can't read it and they don't know what it stands for, but nevertheless, in this bizarre kind of image-driven way, glagolitic is sort of on the way back.